The classroom was cold. It was always cold on Viridian Prime Station, but Hana Kim had gotten used to it over the past 6 months. She sat in the back row of the military history lecture hall, her datapad glowing softly in front of her. Around her, students from a dozen different alien species filled the seats. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some looked almost human, but had eyes that were too large or skin that shimmered in colors Earth people never had. Instructor Vel Thresh stood at the front of the room. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, with 4 arms and dark green scales that caught the light when he moved. He was from the Korvath Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. His voice was deep and confident as he spoke about the Great Expansion Wars. "Today we study the Battle of Kepler 442, Vel Thresh said. His clawed finger touched a control panel and the lights dimmed. Above the class, a holographic image appeared. It showed stars and planets and tiny ships moving through space. This battle took place in the year 2312. It was a decisive victory for the Korvath Empire." Hana looked up from her datapad. She had been reading something else, but now she watched the hologram carefully. "The human fleet," Vel Thresh continued, "attempted to defend this system. They were foolish. They were outmatched. We had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior tactics." He said the word superior like it tasted good in his mouth. The hologram showed human ships in blue and Korvath ships in red. The blue ships were smaller. There were fewer of them. As the simulation played, the red ships surrounded the blue ones. In the seat next to Hana, Minho Park was trying not to fall asleep. He was another human student, and he usually found these lectures boring. On Hana's other side, Jiwon Lee was taking notes like she always did, her stylus moving quickly across her datapad. "The human commander made a critical error," Vel Thresh said. His scales seemed to shine brighter when he talked about human mistakes. "He divided his fleet. This allowed our forces to destroy them piece by piece. Within 6 hours, the human fleet was routed. They retreated in chaos, leaving behind their wounded and their dead." The hologram showed blue ships exploding. Some broke apart in silent bursts of light. Others turned and fled into the darkness of space. The red ships pursued them like predators chasing prey. "This defeat," Vel Thresh said, turning to face the class, "marked the beginning of Earth's client state status. For 3 decades, humanity served under Korvath supervision. They learned humility. They learned their place in the galactic order." Some of the alien students nodded. A few made sounds of approval in their own languages. This was the history they had all been taught. Humanity had been weak once. They had lost. They had learned to survive by accepting stronger species as their betters. Minho yawned quietly. Jiwon kept writing notes, but Hana's eyes were fixed on her datapad now. She was reading something that made her frown. "The Battle of Kepler 442 is an excellent example of what happens when a primitive species confronts an advanced civilization." Vel Thresh continued. "The humans had courage, yes, but courage without wisdom is simply foolishness. They fought bravely and died uselessly." Hana's frown deepened. Her finger scrolled through the document on her datapad. She found what she was looking for and stopped. "The official Korvath battle report," Vel Thresh said, "documented 847 pages of tactical analysis. Every ship movement, every weapons deployment, every communication intercept. It is the most complete record of any battle in galactic history, and it shows, without question, that humanity lost." The hologram faded. The lights came back up. Vel Thresh looked satisfied, like a teacher who had just delivered a perfect lesson. "Are there any questions?" he asked. He didn't really expect any. This was standard history. Everyone knew it. Hana raised her hand. Vel Thresh looked at her. His large eyes blinked slowly. "Yes, Cadet Kim? Did you read the last page?" Hana asked. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Excuse me?" Vel Thresh's scales rippled in a pattern that meant confusion. "The battle report," Hana said. "You said it was 847 pages long. Did you read page 847? Around the classroom, students started paying attention. Minho sat up straighter. Jiwon stopped writing and looked at Hana. Vel Thresh's scales now rippled in a pattern that meant annoyance. "Cadet Kim, I have taught this battle for 15 years. I know the historical record completely. But did you read the last page?" Hana asked again. "The battle ended on page 603, Vel Thresh said. His voice had an edge to it now. "The remaining pages are routine reports, casualty counts, equipment inventories. Debris field analysis. Nothing of tactical significance. Nothing of tactical significance, Hana repeated slowly. She looked down at her datapad, then back up at the instructor. May I show the class something? Velthresh made a gesture with two of his four hands. It was the Korvath equivalent of a shrug, if you must. But make it quick. We have other battles to cover. Hana stood up. She tapped her datapad and suddenly, the main display at the front of the classroom lit up. A document appeared. It was clearly old, formatted in the style that military records used centuries ago. At the top, it read, Korvath Imperial Fleet, Official Battle Report, Kepler 442 Engagement, page 847 of 847. Below that, in red letters was a classification marking, Classified, Level Omega, Declassified 2847. The classroom went very quiet. Even the alien students who didn't care much about human history leaned forward to read. Velthresh stared at the screen. His scales had gone completely still, which meant he was shocked. Where did you get that? He asked. The Galactic Archives, Hana said simply. Everything over 100 years old gets declassified automatically. This page was unlocked 3 months ago. Jiwan gasped softly as she read the screen. Minyo's eyes went wide. The document showed a timestamp. T+72 hours post-engagement. That meant 3 days after the battle officially ended. Velthresh walked closer to the screen. Reading the text that he had apparently never seen before, his scales began to change color, shifting from confident green to uncertain gray. This can't be accurate, he muttered. It's from your own Empire's archives, Hana said. It has the official seal and everything. The text on the screen described something that wasn't in any textbook. It talked about 3 human ships that had remained in the Kepler 442 system. 3 ships that the official history said had been destroyed in the battle. But according to page 847, those ships hadn't been destroyed at all. This is a clerical error, Velthresh said, but he didn't sound confident anymore. A misfiled report. A piece of fiction someone added to the database. Then why does it have the Empress's personal verification code? Hana asked, pointing to a line of symbols at the bottom of the page. Velthresh had no answer for that. The classroom was completely silent now. Every student was reading the words on the screen, trying to understand what they meant. The last line of the document was simple and terrifying. Terran Protocol Crimson Dawn activated. All fleet units advised to maintain maximum distance. Hana looked at Velthresh. Would you like me to explain what Crimson Dawn was? She asked. Or would you prefer to read the rest of the pages you skipped? Velthresh's 4 hands were trembling slightly. His scales had gone from gray to a pale white that the other students had never seen before. It was the Korvath color of fear. Class dismissed, he said quietly. But nobody moved. They all wanted to know what was on that last page. They all wanted to know what really happened at the Battle of Kepler 442, and Hana Kim, the quiet human student from Earth, was going to tell them. Nobody moved. The students sat frozen in their seats staring at the screen. Even though Velthresh had dismissed the class, nobody wanted to leave. They all wanted to know what that document meant. Hana remained standing. She looked calm, but her heart was beating fast. She had waited 6 months for this moment ever since she found out the page would be declassified. Instructor, she said quietly. May I continue? Velthresh stood very still. His forearms hung at his sides. His scales were still that pale white color of fear. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. Hana touched her datapad again. New text appeared on the main screen. It was labeled page 844 of 847. These pages describe what happened after the retreat, Hana said. After the official history says the battle ended. After everyone thought the humans had run away. Minho was fully awake now. He pulled up his own datapad and started searching for related files. Jiwan had stopped taking notes. She just watched and listened. According to this report, Hana continued, 3 human ships stayed behind. The TSS Indomitable, the TSS Defiant, and the TSS Resolve. They appeared to be heavily damaged. They were drifting in the debris field with the other destroyed ships. Appeared to be damaged? Velthresh repeated. His voice sounded strange, like he already knew where this was going and didn't want to hear it. Yes, Hana said. Appeared. The Korvath fleet scanned them multiple times. All 3 ships showed massive hull breaches. Their power signatures were fading. Life support was failing. To every sensor, to every scan, they looked like they were dying. She scrolled to another section of the document. The Korvath fleet was victorious. They had won the battle. So they did what victorious fleets do. They gathered together for a ceremony. All the ships, including the Empress's personal flagship, assembled in formation. One of the alien students, a Thalnari with blue skin and large black eyes, raised a tentacle-like arm. Why would they gather all the ships together? That seems tactically unwise. Because they thought the battle was over, Hana said simply. They thought all the humans were gone. The 3 damaged ships were just wreckage, not worth worrying about. So the entire Korvath armada came together to celebrate their great victory over primitive Earth. Velthresh made a sound deep in his throat. It was not a happy sound. For 72 hours, Hana continued, those 3 human ships drifted. The crews inside were suffering. Life support was actually failing, that part wasn't fake. They were cold. They were running out of air. Some of them were wounded from the battle, but they waited. Waited for what? Jiwan asked. She already suspected the answer, but she wanted to hear it said out loud. For the right moment, Hana said. For the moment when the entire Korvath fleet would be in one place. She pulled up another document. This one was from the human side, declassified at the same time as the Korvath report. It showed orders from a Captain Doyen Choi, commander of the TSS Indomitable. Captain Doyen sent a final message to the retreating human fleet, Hana said. He told them the 3 ships would buy them time. He told them to get to safety. He told them not to come back. The classroom was so quiet that Hana could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems. The human crews, Hana continued, spent those 72 hours preparing. Their chief engineer, Lieutenant Soman Kang, worked with skeleton crews on all 3 ships. She figured out how to overload the reactor cores in a specific way. Commander Hyunwoo Nam calculated the exact timing needed for what they were planning. What were they planning? The Thalnari student asked. Hana looked at Velthresh. The Korvath Instructor's scales were starting to show streaks of dark purple now. That was the color of shame. They were planning something impossible, Hana said. Something that human technology in 2312 wasn't supposed to be able to do. They were going to make a slip space jump. Several students gasped. Slip space jumping was how ships traveled faster than light. But everyone knew you couldn't jump when you were too close to a gravity well. You couldn't jump when you were near other ships. You couldn't jump less than 1,000,000 kilometers without your ship being torn apart by the gravitational forces. The 3 human ships, Hana said, her voice growing stronger, jumped 5 kilometers. Impossible, Velthresh whispered. That's what the Korvath fleet thought too, Hana said. Right up until the moment 3 heavily damaged human ships appeared in the middle of their victory formation. She pulled up the final page again. Page 847. There was a section near the bottom that she highlighted. The report says that the slip space jumps were detected at 72:14:03 mission time. 3 ships appeared simultaneously at coordinates that put them in the exact center of the Korvath armada. The Korvath ships immediately tried to target them, but there wasn't enough time. Time for what? Minho asked, though his voice suggested he already knew. Time to get away, Hana said, because 0.3 seconds after the jumps were detected, all 3 human ships detonated their reactor cores. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the station's hum seemed to fade away. 3 thermonuclear explosions, Hana said quietly, in the middle of the Korvath fleet, at point-blank range, where shields couldn't fully deploy, where there was no time to maneuver, where hundreds of ships were packed together for a celebration. Velthresh sat down heavily in his chair at the front of the room. His forearms covered his face. The Korvath Empire lost 60% of their armada that day, Hana said, including the Empress's flagship, including 3 Grand Admirals, including tens of thousands of their finest warriors. She scrolled down to show casualty figures. The numbers were enormous. The human retreat, she continued, and wasn't a retreat at all. It was the first part of a plan that required sacrifice. The 3 ships that stayed behind had volunteer crews. Everyone on board knew they weren't coming home. 187 people total. They stayed behind and pretended to be dead for 3 days, suffering and waiting, so they could turn humanity's defeat into the Korvath Empire's worst disaster. Jiwan's eyes were wet. She was thinking about the crews on those ships, waiting in the dark and cold, knowing what was coming. The war ended 3 months later, Hana said. Not because humanity lost. Because the Korvath Empire was crippled. They needed decades to rebuild. And during that time, humanity didn't serve as anyone's client state. That was propaganda. The truth is that Earth negotiated from a position of strength, because everyone knew what humans were willing to do when they were cornered. A Greshkin student, with gray skin and no visible eyes, made a clicking sound of disbelief. Why was this not in the historical record? It asked. Because both sides agreed to hide it, Hannah said. The Korvath couldn't admit they lost so badly to primitive humans. Earth couldn't admit they used suicide tactics. Both governments wrote a new history. A clean history. A history where humans lost honorably, and Korvath won decisively, and everyone could move forward without shame or fear. Until now, Velthresh said quietly. He looked up at Hannah. Until someone decided to read the last page. Hannah nodded. Until 3 months ago, when the classification expired and the truth came out. Minho had been searching on his datapad. There are more pages, he said suddenly. Other battles. Other defeats where the last pages tell different stories. I know, Hannah said. I've read them. I've read all of them. She looked around the classroom at all the different species. All the students who had been taught one version of history their whole lives. How many of you have ever wondered why humans are still here? She asked. We're not the strongest. We're not the smartest. We're not the fastest or the most advanced. By all logic, species like us should be extinct or enslaved. But we're not. Why? Nobody answered. Because we read the last page, Hannah said. Because when everyone else thinks the story is over, we keep reading. And usually there's more to the story than anyone expected. The door to the classroom opened. A human in an admiral's uniform stepped inside. He was older, maybe 70, with gray hair and tired eyes. His uniform identified him as Admiral Taeyong Shin. I heard there was a discussion about Kepler 442, he said calmly. I thought I should attend. Velthresh stood up quickly. Admiral, I apologize for the disruption. Don't apologize, Admiral Taeyong said. He walked to the front of the classroom and looked at the display screen. Ah, page 847. I was wondering when someone would find that. He turned to face the class. I was there, he said simply. I was a junior officer on one of the ships that retreated, and I can tell you that what Cadet Kim just told you is absolutely true. The student stared at him. I can also tell you, he continued, that there's more to the story, things that even the declassified pages don't mention. Would you like to hear them? Admiral Taeyong Shin walked slowly to the front of the classroom. His movements were careful, like someone whose body remembered old injuries. He stopped next to Hannah and gave her a small nod of respect before turning to face the students. My name is Taeyong Shin, he said. In 2312, I was 23 years old. I was a weapons officer on the TSS Perseverance, a destroyer in the human fleet at Kepler 442. He gestured to the screen where the document still glowed. Everything Cadet Kim told you is true. But like all official records, it doesn't tell you what it was really like. It doesn't tell you what we felt or what we knew or what we sacrificed. The students were completely silent. Even Velthresh sat still, his scales slowly shifting back to their normal green color as he listened. The battle started badly for us, Admiral Taeyong said. We knew it would. The Korvath fleet was bigger, stronger, and better equipped. Our commanders knew we couldn't win a straight fight, so they didn't plan for one. He touched the screen, bringing up a new image. It showed the human fleet formation at the start of the battle. Before the fighting started, volunteers were called for. 3 ships needed skeleton crews. These ships would stay behind while the rest of us retreated. Everyone who volunteered knew what it meant. No one was coming back for them. Jiwan raised her hand slightly. Why did anyone volunteer? Admiral Taeyong smiled sadly. Because someone had to. Because if we just ran away, the Korvath would chase us all the way back to Earth. We needed to hurt them so badly that they couldn't chase anyone. We needed to make them afraid of what humanity would do if cornered. He pulled up another image. 3 human ships side by side. The TSS Indomitable, TSS Defiant, and TSS Resolve. Captain Doyun Choi commanded the Indomitable. He was 41 years old. He had 2 children back on Earth. He volunteered first, and then he personally approved every other volunteer. He made sure everyone understood what they were agreeing to. Minho was taking notes now, his stylus moving quickly across his datapad. Lieutenant Soman Kang was the chief engineer. Admiral Taeyong continued. She was the one who figured out how to make the impossible jump. She spent weeks before the battle running calculations, testing theories, working out how to do something that should have torn the ships apart. She was 28 years old. She had just gotten married 6 months before the deployment. The classroom felt smaller somehow, more intimate, like they were all sharing a secret that had been kept too long. Commander Hyunwoo Nam was the tactical officer. He calculated exactly when and where the Korvath fleet would gather. He planned the timing down to the second. He was 35. He wrote letters to his family before the battle, to be delivered if he didn't come back. Spoiler alert, he didn't come back. Admiral Taeyong's voice was steady, but his eyes were distant, seeing things from long ago. The battle went according to plan, he said. We fought hard enough to look like we were trying to win. We lost ships, good people died, but we were buying time for the 3 volunteers to get into position, to make themselves look damaged and helpless. He paused, looking at each student in turn, and then we retreated. I was on the bridge when the order came. All ships, full retreat. Maximum speed, we ran, and we left them behind. That must have been hard, the Thalnari student said quietly. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, Admiral Taeyong said. We were leaving our friends to die. We could see their ships on our sensors, drifting among the wreckage. We knew they were alive in there. We knew they were scared, and we ran away. He touched the screen again. A new document appeared. It was a personal log entry, dated 71 hours after the battle started. Captain Doyen kept a log during those 3 days, Admiral Taeyong said. It was recovered from a data buoy they ejected right before the end. He gave us permission to read it, to learn from it when we were old enough to understand. He read from the log. Hour 68. Life support failing. Temperature dropping. Half the crew has frostbite. Oxygen is thin. But we're still alive. Still waiting. Salman says the reactors are ready. Hyunwoo says the Korvath fleet is gathering for their ceremony. Soon now. Soon we'll finish what we started. Juwon had tears running down her face. Several other students looked deeply moved. Even some of the alien students showed signs of emotion in their own ways. Hour 71. Admiral Taeyong continued reading. This is probably my last entry. The fleet is in position. We've said our goodbyes to each other. Soman kissed her wedding ring and told me to tell her husband she loved him. I promised I would, but I won't be telling anyone anything. Hyunwoo is calm. He's always calm. He says the math is perfect. We'll jump right into their midst. They won't even have time to be surprised. I told the crew I'm proud of them. I told them they saved humanity today. I told them their names would be remembered. The classroom was silent except for the soft sound of someone crying. But their names weren't remembered, Admiral Taeyong said quietly. That was the deal both governments made. The Korvath couldn't admit they got beaten by a suicide attack. Earth couldn't admit they used suicide tactics. So both sides agreed to lie, to say humans lost and retreated, to say nothing about the 3 ships or the 187 volunteers. Hana spoke up then. My great-grandmother was on the Indomitable, she said. Her voice was clear but emotional. Engineer Yoonji Kim. She was part of Lieutenant Soman's team. She was 26 years old. Admiral Taeyong turned to look at her. Eunji, he said, remembering. She was the one who solved the coolant problem. Without her work, the reactor overload wouldn't have been stable enough. She saved the mission. I didn't know that until last month, Hana said. My grandmother finally told me the truth on her 90th birthday. She said it was time for people to know what really happened. Time for the last page to be read. Admiral Taeyong nodded slowly. She was right. We've kept this secret for over 500 years. But secrets have a cost. They cost us our history, our pride, our understanding of who we are. He looked at Velthresh. Instructor, you taught these students that humans lost at Kepler 442. You taught them that we were humiliated and forced into servitude. That's what your government wanted you to teach. That's what my government agreed to let you teach. Both sides gained something from that lie. What did we gain? Velthresh asked quietly. The Korvath Empire gained the appearance of invincibility, Admiral Taeyong said. No one knew how badly you'd been hurt. You could rebuild in peace while everyone thought you were still strong. And humanity gained time. Time to develop new technologies. Time to build new ships. Time to become the species we are now. He gestured to the 3 human students in the room. These cadets are here at the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Not as conquered servants, as equals. That wouldn't have been possible if everyone knew what really happened. Both sides needed the lie to survive. Minho looked up from his notes. But now the truth is out. What happens now? That's a good question, Admiral Taeyong said. The declassification was automatic. No one planned for it. Now hundreds of documents are available that tell the real story of the war, not just Kepler 442, dozens of battles, dozens of last pages that change everything we thought we knew. He pulled up a list on the screen. Battle names scrolled past. The Battle of Ross 128, the Siege of Tau Ceti, the Defense of Proxima Station, dozens more. Every single one of these has a last page, he said. Every single one has a secret that changes the story. Some show human victories that were recorded as defeats. Some show defeats that were actually strategic wins. Some show sacrifices that no one was supposed to know about. The Greshkin student made its clicking sound again. Our histories are wrong. All of them. Not wrong, Admiral Taeyong said. Incomplete. There's a difference. The facts in the official histories are true. Humans did retreat from Kepler 442. We did lose many ships. We did suffer terribly. But the story didn't end where the official history said it did. There was more. There's always more. He turned back to Hana. Your great-grandmother Yunji survived in a way. Her sacrifice and the sacrifice of all those crews gave humanity a future. Every human alive today exists because 187 people were willing to die in the dark and cold of space. I want people to know her name, Hana said. I want people to know all their names. They will, Admiral Taeyong said. Now that the truth is out, there's no putting it back. Other species will be angry. They'll feel deceived, and they have a right to feel that way. We lied to them. All of us lied, but we lied for survival. He looked around the classroom at all the different species represented there. The question now is, what do we do with the truth? Do we let it divide us? Do we let it restart old wars? Or do we accept that sometimes survival requires uncomfortable compromises? Velthresh stood up slowly. His scales had returned to their normal green, but there was something different about him now. Something humbler. I have taught military history for 15 years, he said. I thought I knew everything about the Great Expansion Wars. I was wrong. I taught propaganda, not history. I taught the story both governments wanted told, not the story that actually happened. He looked at Hana. Cadet Kim, you asked if I read the last page. I didn't. I should have. A real teacher would have. The next morning, the classroom was packed. Word had spread through the academy about what happened during Velthresh's lecture. Students from every species wanted to hear more. Some stood along the walls because there weren't enough seats. A few instructors came too, wanting to understand what the commotion was about. Hana arrived early and found her usual seat in the back row occupied by 3 Thalnari students who were reading documents on their data pads. She didn't mind. She found a seat near the middle instead. Minho and Jiwon sat on either side of her. Everyone's talking about yesterday, Minho said quietly. Half the station has downloaded those declassified files now. Good, Hana said. That's what they're there for. Velthresh entered the classroom. He looked different somehow. His scales seemed duller, less shiny. His forearms moved with less confidence. When he reached the front of the room, he stood there for a long moment before speaking. Yesterday, he began, I taught you wrong, not just about one battle, about everything. I taught you the history that governments wanted you to know, not the history that actually happened. For this, I apologize. A murmur ran through the crowd of students. Apologies from Korvath instructors were rare. I spent last night reading, Velthresh continued. I read page 847 of the Kepler 442 report. Then I read pages 844 through 847. Then I read the entire report, all 847 pages. Then I started reading reports from other battles. I haven't slept. I've just been reading. He touched the control panel and the screen behind him lit up. It showed a list of battles just like Admiral Taeyong had shown them yesterday. Each of these battles has a last page, Velthresh said. A page that changes everything. A page that I never read because I thought I already knew what happened. I was a fool. Worse, I was a fool who taught other people to be fools. Hana raised her hand. Instructor, you weren't a fool. You were just trusting the sources you were given. A teacher who doesn't question their sources is a fool, Velthresh said firmly. That's what I learned last night. So today, we're going to do something different. We're going to read the last pages together, all of them. Or at least as many as we can. Admiral Taeyong entered the room then. He wasn't wearing his uniform today, just simple civilian clothes. Instructor Velthresh asked me to return, he said, to help provide context for some of the battles. I agreed. Thank you, Admiral, Velthresh said. He pulled up a new document on the screen. Let's start with the Battle of Ross 128. According to my old lesson plans, this was a minor skirmish where human raiders were easily defeated by Korvath patrols. That's what I've been teaching for years. And the last page? Minho asked. The last page says something very different, Velthresh said. It says the raiders were actually a carefully planned strike force. They destroyed a weapons development facility that was building something called a planet cracker, a weapon that could destroy entire worlds. The classroom went silent. Planet crackers were illegal under galactic law. They had been for centuries. The Korvath Empire was building one in secret, Admiral Taeyong said. Humanity found out through intelligence operations. We couldn't prove it through official channels, so we sent a strike team. The official story says they were raiders acting without authorization. The truth is they were heroes who stopped a war crime before it could happen. A Korvath student near the front raised one of her scaled arms. I was told humans were the ones planning to use planet crackers, that the Korvath Empire stopped them. Both sides accused each other of the same thing, Admiral Taeyong said. That's how propaganda works. But the declassified files show which side was telling the truth. Your empire was building the weapon. Humans destroyed it. Then both governments agreed to blame it on rogue raiders and move on. Velthresh pulled up another battle, the Siege of Tau Ceti. I taught that humans abandoned a colony and left thousands to die. The last page says they evacuated 98% of the population in secret before the siege even began. The 2% who stayed were volunteers who made the enemy think the colony was still fully populated. They held out for 3 weeks, giving the evacuees time to escape. More sacrifice, Jiwan said softly. It's a pattern, Hana said. Every time humans look like they're losing or failing or abandoning something, the last page tells a different story. A story about people choosing to sacrifice so others could live. A Greshkin instructor who had been standing near the door spoke up. This pattern exists in our histories too. We have records of defeats and retreats that don't quite make sense. Tactical decisions that seemed foolish at the time but somehow worked out. I'm going to go check our last pages now. Several other instructors left the room, presumably to do the same thing. Velthresh continued through the list. Each battle had a secret. Each had a last page that changed the story. Sometimes it was a sacrifice. Sometimes it was a clever trick. Sometimes it was just information that governments found inconvenient. The defense of Proxima Station, Velthresh read. Official history says the station was lost and all hands died. The last page says 70% of the crew survived. They faked their deaths and went underground as a resistance cell. They sabotaged enemy operations for 5 years before being extracted. Why fake their deaths? A student asked. Because if the enemy knew they were alive, their families back home would be used as hostages, Admiral Taeyong explained. So they died officially. Their families mourned them. And they spent 5 years in hell, cutting enemy supply lines and sending intelligence home. When they finally came back, they couldn't even tell their families where they'd been. Minho was typing rapidly on his datapad. I'm finding more. The incident at Wolf 359, the retreat from Leland, the disaster at Lakai. Every single one has a last page that changes the story. How many battles are there? Jiwan asked. Hundreds, Admiral Taeyong said. The Great Expansion Wars lasted nearly a century. There were thousands of engagements, and most of them have last pages. Some small, some big, but all of them changed the narrative in some way. Hana had been quiet for a while, reading on her own datapad. Now she looked up. It's not just battles, she said. There are last pages for treaties too, for trade agreements, for diplomatic incidents. The whole history of human contact with alien species is full of last pages. Velthresh sat down heavily in his chair. How do I teach this, he asked. How do I teach history when I don't know which parts are true anymore? You teach the questions, Admiral Taeyong said. You teach students to look for last pages. You teach them to ask what happened next and who benefits from this story. And what am I not being told? You turn them into readers instead of listeners. The Thalnari student who had spoken yesterday raised a tentacle. My homeworld has stories about humanity too. Stories about you being lucky or stubborn or somehow always surviving when you shouldn't. We were taught it was just random chance. It wasn't random, Hana said. It was choice. Humans survive because when the story says we should die, we choose to read one more page. We choose to keep going when everyone else would stop. We choose to sacrifice so others don't have to. She stood up, facing the crowded classroom. My great-grandmother Yunji died at Kepler 442. She chose to die. She could have retreated with the fleet, but she volunteered to stay behind because someone had to. And because of her choice and the choices of 186 other people, humanity survived. And now everyone will know her name, Admiral Taeyong said, because the last page has been read. Belthresh pulled up one more document. There's something else in the declassified files, he said. Something I think everyone needs to see. The screen showed a memorial. It was hidden somewhere on the station, according to the location data. The memorial listed names. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Every person who died in a classified operation, Belthresh said. Every sacrifice that was hidden for political reasons. Every hero who couldn't be acknowledged. Their names are all here on a memorial that no one was supposed to see. Where is it? Jiwan asked. Deck 17, Section 9, Admiral Taeyong said. It's been there the whole time. Hidden in plain sight. Disguised as a storage room, but now that the files are declassified, the memorial can be revealed too. He stood up. Would you like to see it? Hana nodded immediately. So did Minho and Jiwan. Most of the other students stood as well. Even some of the alien students wanted to see this place where human sacrifice was recorded. They left the classroom in a group. Instructors followed students. Different species walked together, all heading to the same place. Through corridors and down lifts, the crowd moved deeper into the station. Deck 17 was older than the upper levels. The walls showed their age. The lights were dimmer. Section 9 was at the end of a long corridor that didn't seem to lead anywhere important. Admiral Taeyong stopped in front of what looked like a maintenance door. He pressed his hand against a panel and the door opened. Inside was a room carved from dark stone. The walls were covered with names. Thousands upon thousands of names etched in clean white letters, dates beside each name, some from centuries ago, some from just a few years back. This is where we remember, Admiral Taeyong said quietly. Even when 3 weeks passed. The memorial room that had been hidden for centuries was now the most visited place on Viridian Prime Station. Students came in groups. Instructors came alone. Sometimes people just stood silently, reading the names and thinking about what they meant. Hana came every day. She would stand in front of her great-grandmother's name and talk to her quietly, telling her about the changes that were happening because of one simple question in a classroom. The changes were big. The Galactic Academy announced a complete review of its military history curriculum. Not just human history, all history. Every species had to check their records for last pages, for hidden truths, for stories that had been changed for political reasons. Other academies across the galaxy did the same thing. News networks started reporting on the declassified documents. Historians were suddenly very busy. Some governments were angry, claiming the information should have stayed classified. Others welcomed the truth even if it was uncomfortable. Belthresh had become a different teacher. He didn't lecture anymore. Instead, he asked questions. He showed students the official history, and then helped them find the last pages. He taught them to doubt, to verify, to always ask what happened next. His classroom was always full now. Students wanted to learn this new way of studying history. Other instructors watched his classes to see how he did it. On a quiet afternoon, Hana sat in the memorial room with Admiral Taeyong. They had become friends over the past weeks. He told her stories about the war, about the people he'd known, about her great-grandmother Yunji. She was funny, he said. Did your grandmother tell you that? Yunji always had a joke, even in the worst situations. The day before the battle, she told everyone that if she was going to die in space, at least she'd have a great view. Hana smiled. My grandmother said she was brave, but she never mentioned the jokes. Brave people often are funny, Admiral Taeyong said. They have to be. Fear is heavy. Humor makes it lighter. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by names and memories. What happens now? Hana asked. Now that everyone knows the truth? That's up to the galaxy, Admiral Taeyong said. Some species will be angry at humans for what we did. Some will be angry at their own governments for lying to them. Some will just be sad about all the death that was kept secret. Do you think there will be more wars? Hana asked. I don't think so, Admiral Taeyong said. Wars usually start when people don't understand each other. Now we understand each other better. Now everyone knows what humans are capable of when we're cornered. That's not a comfortable thing to know, but it's honest. And honest fear prevents more wars than comfortable lies. Minho and Jiwon entered the memorial room. They had been doing research in the archives all day, looking through their own family histories. I found my grandfather, Minho said. He looked shaken. He was at the defense of Proxima Station. I always thought he died there. Turns out he was one of the 70% who survived and went underground. He spent 5 years as a resistance fighter and never told anyone, not even after he came home. My great-uncle is on the wall too, Jiwon said. The retreat from Lalande. I never knew. My family never talked about it. Admiral Taeyong stood up and walked to where Minho was standing. Your grandfather, he said. What was his name? Keong, Minho said. Sergeant Keong Park. I knew him, Admiral Taeyong said. His eyes got distant with memory. After the war, we served on the same ship for a while. He never spoke about Proxima. None of them did. It was classified and they'd been trained to keep secrets, but I could tell it had changed him. Made him quiet, thoughtful. Is he still alive? Minho asked. I believe so, Admiral Taeyong said. He retired to Mars about 20 years ago. You should visit him. Ask him about Proxima. Now that it's declassified, he can finally talk about it. Minho nodded, wiping his eyes. I will. I'll go this summer. The four of them stood together in the memorial room, surrounded by the names of people who had given everything so humanity could survive. It wasn't a sad place, Hana thought. It was a place of honor, a place where truth lived. The door opened and Velthresh entered. He moved slowly, respectfully, like someone entering a sacred space. Behind him were several other Korvath, including some high-ranking military officers. Cadet Kim, Velthresh said. These officers asked to meet you. They wanted to see the memorial, and they wanted to apologize. One of the officers stepped forward. He was old, his scales faded with age. I am General Krethik, he said. I fought at Kepler 442. I was a young officer on the Empress's flagship. I survived the explosion, but barely. Hana didn't know what to say. This was someone who had been there, someone who had seen what her great-grandmother did. For centuries, I told myself that day was a great victory, General Krethik continued, that we had defeated the primitive humans, that their retreat proved our superiority. But it was a lie. We barely survived. The Empress didn't survive. Most of my friends didn't survive. And it was all because we underestimated your people. He looked at the wall at the names from Kepler 442. I wanted to see their names. The people who nearly destroyed us. The people who made us realize that humans were not prey. They were predators wearing prey's clothing. They weren't trying to destroy you, Hana said quietly. They were trying to save us. There's a difference, is there? General Krethik asked. They killed thousands of my people. To save millions of ours, Hana said. If they hadn't done what they did, the war would have continued. Earth would have fallen, and eventually, after you defeated humanity, you would have turned on other species. That planet cracker you were building wasn't just for us. The general was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he finally said. We were planning to use it on the Thalnari next. Then the Greshkin. We thought we could rule the galaxy through fear. Your people taught us that fear cuts both ways. He reached out with a scaled hand and touched Engineer Yoonji Kim's name on the wall. She was brave. They all were. And I'm sorry that we made their bravery necessary. It was the most honest thing Hana had heard a Korvath say. She felt something release in her chest, some tension she'd been carrying. Thank you, she said, for reading the last page, for admitting the truth. It's your great-grandmother who deserves thanks, General Krethik said. She saved more lives than she took, including mine. If the war had continued, I would have died in some other battle. Instead, I've lived to be old. I've had children and grandchildren. All because 187 humans decided to end a war in the most terrible way possible. More people were arriving at the memorial now. Word had spread that General Krethik was here, that a Korvath officer who fought at Kepler 442 was paying his respects. Soon the room was crowded with humans and Korvath, old enemies standing together reading names and sharing stories. Admiral Taeyong put a hand on Hana's shoulder. You did this, he said quietly. You asked one question and changed everything. I just read the last page, Hana said. That's all it takes sometimes, he said. One person willing to look for the truth. One person willing to ask uncomfortable questions. One person willing to challenge the official story. Jiwan was talking to a Korvath student about the battle reports. Minho was telling a Thalnari about his grandfather. Different species, different worlds, but all connected by shared history that they'd finally learned to read completely. Velthresh approached Hana with something in his hands. It was a data pad, but an official one with the Academy seal on it. The Academy board met yesterday, he said. They've decided to create a new course. It's called Reading the Last Page Complete Military History. They want you to help design it. Me? Hana said. I'm just a cadet. You're the cadet who changed how we teach history, Velthresh said. You're the one who showed us that complete means complete. All the pages, not just the comfortable ones. Hana took the data pad. On the screen was a message from the Academy Commandant. It offered her a position as a teaching assistant, helping to redesign the curriculum for all military history courses. Will you do it? Admiral Taeyong asked. Hana looked around the memorial room. At all the names, at all the people, human and alien who were finally learning the truth, at her great-grandmother's name on the wall. Yes, she said. Someone has to make sure people keep reading the last page. Over the next months, the new curriculum spread. Not just at the Galactic Academy, but at schools across hundreds of worlds. Students learned to question official histories. They learned to look for missing information. They learned that every story has a last page, and that page matters just as much as the first. Some called it the last page revolution. Others called it the truth movement. But whatever name it had, it changed how the galaxy thought about history, about truth, and about humanity. Because humanity's real strength wasn't weapons or tactics, or even bravery. It was the refusal to accept that the story was over when someone else said it was over. It was the determination to read one more page, to ask one more question, to keep looking until the truth was found. Years later, when Hana had become a full instructor herself, she would start every class the same way. She would show her students a historical battle or event. She would present the official version, and then she would ask the same question that started it all.